All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're going to talk about a SQL concept that honestly is what really separates the beginners from the pros. It's a tool that takes your analysis from just, spitting out numbers to actually telling a compelling story with your data. We are talking about window functions, what I like to call the analyst's real superpower. So, let's get into it. So, let me throw a scenario at you, something you've probably run into. Imagine you've got this simple list of student scores, and your boss says, hey, can you add each student's rank? Now, your first instinct might be to use a group by, right? But wait, if you do that, it's going to collapse all your rows. You'll lose all the individual student details. So the question is, how do you add that new piece of info, the rank, without destroying the original data? Well, that's the exact puzzle we're going to solve. And that right there, that's the core difference. Think about it. Group by is all about subtraction. It summarizes. It takes a bunch of rows and squishes them down into one. But a window function, it does the exact opposite. It's all about addition. It enriches your data. It looks at every single original row and says, hey, let's add a new column with some cool new calculation. It adds context. It doesn't take anything away. It enriches. It never, ever reduces. And this is where our superpower finally comes into play, the window function. This is what lets us do those complex calculations across a whole set of rows, all while keeping our original data perfectly intact.
Okay. So let's get the official definition out of the way. A window function is just a function that does a calculation across a set of rows, a window, that are related to the current row we're on. The way I like to think about it is it gives each row a temporary little superpower of its own. It can look at its neighbors, see where it fits in, and understand its place in the grand scheme of things before the final result pops out. Now, the absolute heart and soul of every single window function is the over clause. This is it. This is where all the magic happens. This little clause is how you define that window of rows that your function is going to look at. I mean, without the over clause, it's just a boring old function that can only see its own row. The over clause is literally what gives it the superpower.
Okay, so how do we actually build this over clause? How do we tell SQL, hey, I want you to look at these specific rows? Well, it really just comes down to two key building blocks. That's it.
To make this super clear, let's use a simple sales table. We've got dates, cities, and sales amounts. I mean, this is a classic scenario, right? You're probably going to want to see how Delhi's sales are doing over time, or how Mumbai's sales on a certain day stack up against other days in Mumbai. Okay, building block number 1, partition by. The easiest way to think about this, it's like sorting your laundry. When you say partition by city, you're basically telling SQL to put all the Delhi rows in one pile and all the Mumbai rows in another. And the key thing here is you're not throwing any data away. You're just creating these nice, neat groups to work with.
And the second building block is order by. So once you've got your neat piles of data from partition by, the order by clause tells you the sequence of the rows inside each of those piles. And this is so important for calculations that care about sequence. I mean, think about it. How can you possibly calculate a running total if you don't know which sale happened first, second, and third?
So if you remember anything, remember this simple distinction. Partition by is all about choosing the group. It answers the question, which rows are friends? Then, order by decides the order inside that group. It asks, okay, who's first in line? If you can get that down, you've totally unlocked the core logic. You're not just looking at single rows anymore. You're seeing the relationships between them.
Okay, so we've got the mechanics down. Now for the fun part. What can we actually do with this stuff? What kind of awesome analytical doors does this new superpower unlock for us?
Well, probably the most common use is ranking. Remember that student scores problem we started with? This is how you solve it. And what's cool is that window functions give us a few different ways to rank, and knowing the difference between them is super important, especially when you're dealing with messy, real-world data that always has ties.
All right, let's look at the differences here, because the nuance is everything. So say you have two people tied for second place. Row number doesn't care about ties. It'll just call them 2 and 3. Rank, on the other hand, will say, okay, you're both second place, but then it leaves a gap, so the next person is fourth. And then there's dense rank, which also calls them both second, but it doesn't leave a gap. The next person is third. It seems like a small thing, but it's a huge difference depending on what you're trying to analyze.
So ranking is great for comparing a row to the whole group. But what if you just want to compare a row to its immediate neighbor? You know, the one right before or right after. Well, that's where our next couple of functions come in, and this quote says it all.
It's really that simple. Back in our sales data, if you use lag amount, you get a new column that shows you the sales from the previous day.
And lead amount does the opposite. It looks ahead and grabs the sales from the next day. This is just an incredibly clean and fast way to do this. Trust me, it saves you from writing these horrible, slow, complicated self-joins people used to have to do. And of course, we can't forget about running totals. This is another huge one. You can take a familiar function like sum, combine it with an over clause that orders by date, and bam! You get a running total. This is so powerful. Now, each row doesn't just show you the sales for that one day, it shows you the total cumulative sales up to that day. It's the perfect way to track growth over time.
Okay, so we've seen what they are, and we've seen some of the awesome stuff they can do. But let's zoom out for a second and talk about the bigger picture. Why is learning this stuff so important for your career as an analyst?
Well, for one thing, knowing the common mistakes shows you really get it. You know, things like completely forgetting the over clause, yep, it happens, or using some of the trickier functions without really understanding how they work. And honestly, a big part of being a pro is knowing when not to use them. Sometimes a simple group by is all you need, and it's the right tool for the job.
So yeah, there's some complexity here, some potential traps. So why bother? Why go through the trouble of mastering all this? What's the real payoff for you?
Because this right here is one of the absolute top skills that separates a junior analyst from a senior one, period. It just unlocks a whole new level of analysis. Suddenly you can answer much more interesting questions like, how do this month's sales compare to last month's for every single product? Or who are our top 10% salespeople in each region?
And hey, here's a little pro tip for you. Mastering window functions is one of the best ways to nail a technical interview. It immediately shows that you know how to write clean, efficient SQL. And it proves you're not going to be writing those slow, messy self-joins that were the only way to do this stuff years ago.
So, I want to leave you with this one final thought. Group by summarizes the past. It's kind of like just reading the headlines of a newspaper. But window functions, they let every single row see the bigger picture. They let you read the entire story. And that, my friends, is a true analytical superpower.